Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 65.
Ben, did you know that at some point in America's history, the maximum speed limit across the nation was 65 miles per hour?
What? No, that's not possible. It's been 55.
It was 55. You're right. The national maximum speed limit was 55 miles an hour as instituted by the Emergency Highway Energy Conservation Act of 1974 as a result of some international politics dealing with OPEC and oil prices and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so they're running out of gas. They're like, well, we can conserve the gas if we just tell people not to go too fast.
Well, so they set the speed limit at 55. But then what you don't realize is that law was modified in 1987 to push it up to 65 miles per hour.
87?
87.
I feel like that never caught on. Like, they could push it up to 65 or they had to?
The maximum was 65. And so that was the cap. States could
I wonder if some states decided not to.
Like it was only certain roads that was set to that limit. Like this is the maximum you can drive on like interstate
freeways,
highways.
Yeah, limited access.
And that was a requirement. You had to be the maximum speed limit on the interstate highways had to be this number and no higher in order to get federal funding to maintain those highways.
Okay.
Now from 1987 until the law was repealed in I'm looking for it. It's here somewhere. 1995, I want to say.
Yes. Now, I do remember that because there was all the jokes about like the states that decided that they were going to not have a speed limit after that.
There are some states to this day that don't have speed limits. There's a couple of...
There is a state, I think, but yeah.
It's like Montana in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, they call it the Montana Bond.
Be safe. Like, go nuts.
Reasonable and prudent is what the signs say.
No one... in this country, there's no two people you could sit down in a room and have them agree on what's reasonable and prudent.
Yeah. Well, I've never driven on the interstate in Montana, but if I did, I might decide to figure it out.
I always assumed that the speed limit was just 10 miles an hour faster than what was posted. I thought that they had that baked in.
Practical experience at work.
I mean, I've blown past cops going 10 over many a time and not gotten pulled over. And most of the time, it's just because I'm going with flow of traffic. Earlier today, I was on a stretch of highway just going down to the grocery store. Yeah. And the speed limit on the highway by my house is 75 miles an hour. And I was going 80, and people were zipping around me. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and I don't know what that means you do in a country where you could get pulled over by a cop for speeding. Like, if there's a cop there going 75, what do you do?
If there's a cop in front of me, I'm not going to pass him, especially if he's going the speed limit. If he's not going the speed limit, then yeah, I'm going past him. But I'm not going to go more than like 5 over the speed limit past him, if that makes sense.
When was the last time you got a speeding ticket?
I have never received a speeding ticket.
Wow. Man, I think the last time I got one was in 2004, 2002.
I was pulled over for speeding once, but he let me off with a warning because I was getting off of the night shift from piloting a drone. And I was the only one awake for miles in any direction. And I was going like 7 over.
Right. Okay. And he saw you in your uniform and you were sober and he would let you go.
Basically, that was it. And he's like, license, registration, and proof of insurance? And I had all 3. And I was clearly coming from work. And like that was it. He ran my tags to make sure they weren't expired. And I'm sure he let me go after that for...
Yeah. I got a speeding ticket in 2002. I've been pulled over twice since then for speeding. And both times I got the good old boy let you off because you're in the military thing.
Well, don't lean on that too hard because that's going to go away in a little while.
Yeah. Why?
Oh, you're not going to.
Oh, I'm going to retire.
What drives me nuts? All right, listeners, if you're one of these people, like reevaluate your life choices. Okay, is you're on the freeway and you're driving, and then you see a bunch of brake lights. Everybody slows down like 5 or 10 miles an hour. And it's because there's a cop on the side of the road that has pulled somebody over. Everyone, listen to my voice. He already has somebody. He's not going to abandon the ticket that he is writing to dart back out into traffic to chase you down. Like
I love it. Thank you for that rant.
But it makes why?
It's not a speed trap. It's already been sprung.
Yes, the bear trap hasn't been reset yet. You are free to run through it as fast as you want.
All right. Well, good rant. So, Josh, I think last time you got to have that moment where you were able to enjoy the glory of having made a past prediction where you were correct. So I want to talk about one of mine.
Ooh, excellent.
So I'm going way back in time here, like a year and a half ago, when the COVID quarantine had just kicked off, and we were projecting some potential impacts. That was episode 16 of the Bad at Magic podcast. And in that episode, I predicted that movie theaters would fail.
That they were going to go away and not be a thing anymore.
Yeah. Was I that? I can't remember if I was that fatalistic about it, but I do at least remember saying that this is going to be a big problem for movie theaters and that some would close.
It's been a long time since I heard episode 16, but knowing us, I think you were along the lines of, well, I think movie theaters are going to have a tough time with this. And then I came around and said, oh, they're all going to burn to the ground and starve.
But there's a reckoning to be had for theaters. I don't see how they make it through this.
Oh,
that's my prediction.
The
death has been coming for a long time, but it was going to take a catalyzing event, and I think this is it.
This is going to be the nail in the coffin. I agree. Movie theaters, I can't see them surviving this.
Anyway, that was in March of 2020. I said that. Over Christmas, we took my family to go see the new Spider-Man movie in a theater that's just 10 minutes from my house. And then after Christmas, I drove past it, and it was completely closed. And I couldn't believe it.
Oh, it's just done. Dunsky.
Yeah, closed.
Wow. There are a bunch of those that have shut down. Not all of them, though. And I am... this is a transition that's happened. Like they're in their twilight era, their dying breaths. These are the death rattles of the movie theaters.
It feels
whenever I see a preview for a new movie, and then they have to put the tagline at the end, only in theaters, it in theaters. And they're having to remind people now. It's like, no, this one's not going to be on streaming. And I always wonder, how much did the theaters cough up to get this IP solely into the theater for 2 weeks before it released on streaming?
It's the inflexibility of the business system behind the industry. Like, how do we change to a new revenue stream, a new way of doing business as the way of funding what we do? I saw one that was a little bit softer than what you said. Instead of saying, we're going to prevent you from seeing this at home, it was like, you're going to want to see this on the big screen.
They're going to say that about everything.
Yeah, it was the new murder mystery, like Murder on the Nile or something like that just filled with all of the sexiest men and women in Hollywood. Dressed in beautiful clothes, doing sneaky things.
Ben, I don't know how you like to enjoy movies, but whenever I am going to watch a movie with a bunch of sexy people, I want to be in my home privately with no one around me.
Yeah. All right, so that was my prediction come true.
Good on you. That was a good prediction, and there's no better feeling than being right and having recorded evidence of it.
Now, another bit of follow-up from last time, I talked about an idea that I think I'll continue to explore here on the podcast, and that is that as one of the positive externalities that we have of the proliferation of high-tech gadgets is that they start to be interoperational, and then people supply their own technology in a case where, and then it offloads it from its previous source. Now, I talked about this a little bit, but we're definitely in this transition period with cars where it used to be a desirable thing for your car to have high-tech gadgets in it. And, you wanted GPS or the OnStar or a really good stereo or a high-capacity CD player, all those kinds of things. And all of those functions have been consolidated into a smartphone. And smartphones, all you need now is a card that can integrate with your smartphone. And then the car is as good as it needs to be forever, and people will follow the tech refresh cycle for the smartphone. And it supplies navigation, it supplies music, it supplies emergency services. Everything you need is all there in the smartphone, and the car doesn't have to just have long-in-the-tooth technology that gets outdated real quickly.
That's a good point, because then the phone becomes the modular brain of the vehicle, not the brain of like the engine and the stuff that you care about mechanically, but all of the ways that you interface with it in a way that isn't actually moving from point A to point B.
So last year when my daughter crashed our 2005 minivan and we had to buy a new one, that was the primary feature I was looking for in the new one. I didn't want it to have all those cool things. I just wanted to be able to integrate with my smartphone because then I'm good.
But can you get one without all? Can you get a car that doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but has all the ones that you want, like the self-opening sliding doors and the fold-down bucket seats and all that?
We're almost there. Like, it has the ability to have a navigation system, but I don't know if it does or not because I only use the one on my phone.
Okay.
But it also has the sliding doors and the tinted windows and stuff like that.
So I'm just comparing it to, usually there's only one sliding scale. Either the car gets more features or it gets less.
Yeah, I totally get it. But I'm saying this is a benefit. I saw this great internet meme, I guess you'd call it, the image macro, where it showed this Radio Shack ad from like 1994 or something like that. It's this guy and he has all these gadgets. There's a CD player and a tape recorder and all of these, dozens of gadgets around him. I'll find it and I'll put a copy in the photo album I post for this episode. And then now all of that is a smartphone. All of it.
Yeah, you replace the entirety of a Radio Shack with one device that fits in your pocket.
Absolutely. And we say that like it's a joke or cute, but what we're also saying is it's efficient. It eliminates a lot of waste. It makes our lives better.
Yeah, in a very real way.
Yeah, and makes everyone have access to things that previously you didn't. Like if you bought all that stuff in the Radio Shack ad, it'll cost you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But now you just get a smartphone, and maybe you don't have some of that functionality, and all you got to do is download an app, and now you have it.
This is the second episode in a row where you've gone out of your way to hype smartphones. Are you bucking to get in one of these big tech companies? Are you hoping there's a Verizon or an AT&T executive listening, and you're going to try to get in good with them once you get out of the military?
I can neither confirm nor deny what you just said. However, listeners, if you want to get in on this discussion, what I'm looking for is other examples of positive externalities. The underlying idea that I'm talking about here is things that we have in our life that aren't just good for what we got them for, but also improve our life in other ways and other people's lives as well. So it doesn't just have to be limited to smartphones. Smartphones are just a particularly good example of something that has positive externalities.
Verizon, sponsor the podcast.
Okay, so another thing we talked about last time was I mentioned to you the movie trope of, usually in rom-coms, where there's two characters come together and they both have been separated for a while, and they begin to have a conversation, and they both have something important to say, and they say, I have something to say. I have something to say too. Okay, let me go first. And the wrong person goes first, and hijinks ensue.
Yes.
And I mentioned how I think the exact words I used in the podcast last time were, this never happens in real life. And this week it happened to me.
This is what you get for tempting fate. Please give me all of the details of this ridiculous situation.
Okay, so I am in the middle of a complex IT acquisition at work, and it's competing with a sister IT acquisition that another major command is conducting. And there's a little bit of rivalry going on between our two, and they're a little bit ahead of us in the race. So just before Christmas, they finished theirs and sent out their advertisement, and it's what initiated that briefing I had to give to my general that I talked about before on the podcast.
Gotcha.
Well, the project officer that's my functional equivalent at my level in that other command is the person behind all of this that generated all of those really important people talking to each other that brought me into the general's office. So I'd not talked to this guy since last September or October timeframe, when we kind of eyed each other up and decided we were going to do this race and try to get ours into service. And he beat me. Anyway, it finally came time that I needed to talk to him again. So I called him and I got him on the phone, and I'm like, what do I want to call him? I'll call him Richard. Hey, Richard, it's Ben. Hey, Ben, haven't talked to you since last year. Yeah, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Oh, that's funny. I've been trying to get a hold of you too. Yeah, we really need to talk. Yeah, we really need to talk. Which one of us should go first?
Let's see. Are you going to concede defeat, or am I going to gloat first? Who's going to go?
Yeah. Anyway, I went first. It was probably wrong because that's how it goes.
Did you apologize and bow your head and be all gracious loser, and then he just laid it on thick?
Yeah, because I needed to beg him I needed his help. So that's, yeah. Anyway, Bader Meinhof principle at work there. You say something and then you notice it again in real life. So
that'll happen.
Now, I found another when I was listening to what you said. Now, okay, in episode 64, you talked about adopting CGP Gray's theme self-organization system.
Yes.
And you told the story of you calling customer service because your book hadn't arrived yet. And you said that as soon as you had them on the phone, you got the email that said that your order had been received and that your order had been shipped. And you said there's absolutely no chance that just shipped by happenstance.
Yes.
And then I said, I have a secret about that. I'll tell you later.
Okay. And now hang on a second. Is this related to the fact that when I went to the mail and got it, I received 2, not 1, but 2 in 2 separate envelopes?
Yes.
Oh, Ben, okay, go for it.
Okay, so you figured it out already. When you texted me about this and I watched the video about it, I thought Josh would really like this. I wonder if Nicole's going to let him order this book. I'll send him one. So I went to the website and I ordered one and I sent it to you. And then you texted me after I'd already ordered it that you ordered one as well. And I thought, crap, what do I do? I'll just let him have 2 because they're only good for like a quarter anyway, and then he'll have 2. But I didn't tell you. So when you came on the podcast and said when you called customer service and reminded them that of your order, then it shipped out, and you said there's absolutely no way that just shipped by happenstance, I have a question for you, Josh.
Okay, Ben.
When your order arrived at your house, did both packages arrive the same day?
Both packages arrived simultaneously.
Okay.
And what confused me is, like, I was looking at them like, okay, this is what I thought. What I thought was that in customer support's rush to try to get my order filled, they screwed something up and accidentally created a duplicate and then sent me 2. But
so that is not what happened.
That is not what happened.
Not only that, but my order came to my email address and I did not call customer service.
Oh, geez.
So guess what? It was happenstance that your product shipped while you're on the phone with customer service.
Can you prove that? Like,
I just did.
I mean, all right. Like, if I want to buy into that, then I suppose like I have to suspend a little bit of my disbelief, and I could say, yeah, you're right. Maybe it was totally a coincidence that at the exact same time that I contacted their customer service, I didn't demand anything, asking them about an order that had been delayed multiple days, that it was just right then, like within the hour, it was in the hopper.
That's what I'm saying.
That would be a crazy coincidence, but a non-zero chance of it happening, so I will have to admit that, yes, that is in the realm of possibility.
Okay, well, maybe you need to dial back your call customer service by about an hour.
I was already 3 days past when it was supposed to have shipped.
All right. Well, I wasn't in a rush because I ordered it and then knew that you'd ordered one as well, and I was just going to let that play out.
SOB. Stop buying me gifts. Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
It's a lovely device. I have it on my desk. I touch it every day, and I'm enjoying it so far.
All right. That's great. If I find myself needing something like that, maybe I'll try one too. It is time for Bad at Husbanding, Josh. It's been a while since we've done this. I've got one and you've got one. I'll let you go first.
So this is it depends on your perspective. Like, some people are going to hear this segment, they're going to think, oh man, he knocked it out of the park. That was fantastic. And I have a feeling all the ladies listening are going to be like, oh, what an idiot. But that's fine. We're going to call it Bad at Husbanding and just cover all the bases.
Yes.
So today, actually, as we are recording, this is my wife's birthday.
Aw, happy birthday, Nicole.
Happy birthday, sweetheart. Thank you for listening. Everybody say happy birthday to Nicole in your car. I'll give you a couple seconds. Thank you for that. Okay. So I've mentioned on this podcast before that I'm notoriously bad at giving gifts to my significant other because I want to make it thoughtful, and I don't want to just go to her list on Amazon and buy her the things that she buys herself throughout the year. I want to feel like I want her to understand that I'm racking my brain and putting an effort to to find something.
Giving gifts is her love language, and she speaks it well.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this time I thought I had a pretty good one. So my wife is very much into Celtic like culture and lore and folk tales and that kind of thing. And she's got a lot of books and read a lot of things about it. One of the better gifts that I got her years and years ago is just a random ring that she wears on her other hand. That's a Celtic knot. It's just a pattern that goes all the way around. And she really likes that ring and she wears it all the time.
Cool.
So I figured I could get her something in that realm. And I had, she probably sent it to me months before, but it hit me like a lightning bolt. And I remembered this website and I went to it and it was still a thing. And so you can go to this website and you can buy 1 foot by 1 foot plot of land in northern Scotland somewhere. And the idea is that they're going to preserve it. And it's part of, each one of these little plots is part of much larger plots that they're trying to conserve, and they're raising funds for it.
Okay.
But the shtick
What's the significance of owning a piece of land in Scotland?
Because, according to ye old rules and laws and property ownership in the old country, if you own land in Scotland, then you technically are entitled to the title Lady or Lord of that land.
Okay. Are you telling me that your wife is Scottish royalty?
The lowest level. My wife is the Lady Nicole Fleshman.
Officially,
like I bought the plot of land and I received a very formal certificate. It says proclamation at the top and has a big old explanation of all the rules. And she is officially like it's all over their website. Like she is officially, she can put it on her emails, on her calling cards, everything. According to Scottish law, she is a lady.
Okay. So many questions. Does she know about this already?
She does. I gave it to her yesterday. I couldn't like it came in and I could not contain my excitement for it.
How was it received?
It was received in a way where I'm not sure. Like I think she likes it. Like she received it and smiled and laughed a bit. Like in a genuine way.
I feel like the opportunity still lies ahead of you now.
Oh no,
like,
she is.
Can you get it printed on your checks? Do you, use it formally in introducing her to polite company?
Yes. But there's the thing: is my wife is the most soft-spoken, humblest person on the planet. She praise, like in the workplace, professional workplace. I run on praise. Like I must be praised 3 times a day, or I'm going to get depressed. She is exactly the opposite. Like she is uncomfortable when people praise her for like doing a good job or like drawing any attention to her. She just wants to do her job, do it well,
okay,
and not receive the acknowledgement for it. So this is one of those things that.
But you weren't expecting her to like jump up and down and squeal, were you?
No, but I got more than I expected, honestly, with her. Like, it seemed like she genuinely liked it, at least at first. I don't know if she still does or if she put on a good show, sweetheart. I think that you like it. And if not, let me know. We'll do something else.
Did she get to name it or anything like that?
No, but we have a unique identifying number. And if we ever go to Scotland, the company will tell us how to get to her plot.
Okay. Wow. Still more questions. It is... Wow. Okay. Here's my question. Were you just like surfing the web and this was some random pop-up ad and intrigued you and you thought this might be something Nicole likes? Or did you just get this idea out of nowhere and search to see if it was a thing?
She sent me a link to this website months and months ago, probably back in the fall.
Okay.
Like, oh, you want to be a lord?
So she planted the idea.
She planted the idea a long time ago. And then as I was trying to rack my brain for a gift in the past month and a half, that struck me as something that might be...
All right.
It's a little outside of the box, but still within the realm of things. So when you told me
you were doing this, I was skeptical, but you didn't say that detail. Now I feel like it was a lot safer of a place to go.
Here's the other fun thing, is that she's getting her doctorate, right?
Yeah.
But she doesn't want, like, and I've asked her what she wants to be called. I'm going to call you doctor. She's like, don't call me doctor. Because she's not getting an MD. She's not getting a medical degree. She's not going to be a medical doctor. And people expect, if you call them doctor, whatever. It seems like there's a stigma. Like
there is a stigma. We always know that guy at work that's just has a PhD in like some idiot thing and just meant he went to school forever and he insists on being called doctor and we all do it with an eye roll.
There you go. Well, what we did is we went on the internet and we found, is there other things that you can call people with doctorates in other fields? And we found that in Scandinavia, the term that they have for people with that advanced of a degree is translates to the very learned.
Oh, nice.
Right? And that's the one that we're going with. So when my wife finishes her doctoral program, she will be the very learned Lady Nicole Fleshman.
That is outstanding. Yeah. I feel like it needs one other thing at the end.
Oh, no, she already has 3 other things at the end because she's got her master's and then she's got 2 different certifications in HR. So she's got like 9 letters already that are abbreviations after her name. So I'm just stacking stuff in front of her name.
Okay. Well, I do have more you can add at the end. I'll do that for bad English, but not this week. But I'll reference this conversation when we do it next time.
I was doing that facetiously the other night and she started throwing stuff at me. Like,
but just saying random letters after her name?
No, the Lady Nicole Fleshman, first of her name, like Lady of Organization and good firings. Like
So
I was
you
just trying
sounded
to
like Paul Bettany on A Knight's Tale, reading her patents before the masses.
Yes, that's what I was trying to come up with, different patents. And like I said, she doesn't like the self-aggrandizement, so she started throwing things at me, so I stopped.
You needed to be holding a bugle or something. It would be great.
Yes, with like a little flag on the end of it.
Yeah. All right, it's time for my bad at husbanding.
Yes.
Okay, so I realized it, now that we're in our 23rd year of marriage, that my wife and I were doing something that I've seen other couples do that can sometimes bring about this odd end of a marriage when people think a marriage is going to last forever. They get divorced after 25 years or something like that.
Oh, geez.
And this is making peace versus building unity. So I want to talk about that. Making peace is where you identify areas within your relationship that there's friction, but instead of resolving the issue, you just avoid it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, where it's just, you just give up this fight.
Right. And unfortunately, if you do too many of those, all of a sudden there are just all these areas where you've just withdrawn from each other. And instead of there being connection, there's just distance. And my sister and my brother-in-law were over at my house over Christmas, and I noticed them doing something every day. They were not Christmas, over Thanksgiving, and every day they were here, they would get out the New York Times crossword and do it together. And I noticed there was a little bit of friction with them while they were doing it. So later I asked her about it. I'm like, so what's with you guys doing the crossword together? And she's like, we just decided that we needed to do something together. I'm like, I can tell you guys don't quite do it the same way. It causes a little bit of friction. She's like, yeah, but I think it's important that we do it. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Because she told me, like, his way of, like, for instance, she was like, every time he thinks of a word, he just writes it into the blanks. Like, that's going to be the right word. What if it's not the right word?
Well, how are you going to remember the word if you don't write it down?
Sure, we can argue both sides of this. And we've identified now this is a conflict. So if you take the making peace approach to this, you'd be like, well, I guess we can't do the crossword together.
Well, I mean, can you, or do you just, one party admit that the other person's, like, even if they don't like it, the other party just conforms to the expectations of the other without any kind of discussion or conversation about it, just to facilitate the activity, whether or not they're enjoying it?
Yes. And I think the underlying thing you have to examine here is it important that we continue to do this together even though we don't see eye to eye on the right way to do it, enough that we struggle through our individual, whatever, quirks, OCD, whatever the problem is that's causing the conflict? Or is it more important to have peace?
Well, I think you're talking about a couple of different things. Like, you're talking about resolving the conflict internal to the activity that they are doing, or going back, taking a step away from the situation and questioning the baseline assumption that we are going to do this activity together in the first place.
Yes.
I feel like those are two different conversations.
Okay. I'm talking about both, but let's just focus on one at a time. So whether or not we should do this together is, if you set, as we've talked a lot about, like Asimov's 3 rules of robotics and what happens if you change the order of the rules of robotics.
Yeah, a disaster.
If you set as your prime directive, we shall have peace at all times, and if a situation arises where peace is disrupted, then we avoid that situation because that's the quickest way to restore peace.
Yeah, down that road lies resentment and just bitterness.
And distance. You just avoid everything. So I realized that we'd been doing this a little bit in our relationship, so I'd kind of been looking for a way to get back. For instance, my wife and I used to spend a lot of time together in the kitchen early in our marriage. I wouldn't say it was harmonious, but it was just necessary. We had little kids and we would do the dishes and stuff. And now that the kids are older and more self-sufficient, neither of us spend as much time in the kitchen, but she started to avoid it more and more altogether. And I realized that it's a place where we used to have togetherness, and now it's just me by myself. And I don't know if it's important to establish whose fault it is, but because of the withdrawal, it just feels like a lost opportunity. So on the podcast, when I was talking about my goals and how when I'd found out about that cold gravy marriage list, where I had my wife make a list of all the things I could do to improve as a husband, she listened to that episode of the podcast and came to me and she's like, you're right. I never did ask you for a cold gravy list. So what's on your list? And I didn't have one ready. So I thought about it for a while, and I only had one thing. I was like, let's spend time together in the kitchen again.
You mean you only had one thing that you're willing to share on the podcast because we don't want to get demonetized?
We're keeping our G rating. So I said, let's spend time together in the kitchen again.
That's nice.
We stopped doing that. So that's our thing. I'll let you know how it goes. But that feels like sometimes you may actually go towards an area where there's been confrontation or conflict in the past. And I think that's actually can be more important than having peace, is building unity. And that sometimes requires a bit of friction.
It does. I know what you're talking about. My wife and I have started to identify things like that. And we've both committed ourselves to, when we see these situations happening, if we identify it, we want to have a conversation about it in the moment, rather than just like what you're saying, one person goes quiet just to facilitate. Let's just get it over with and move on with the rest of our day. Because it is hard. It's difficult to stop what you're doing and have like a deep conversation about expectations and assumptions and feelings and all the things that are associated with the stuff when it happens.
Yeah. What are some ones like that where you guys actually, maybe one or the other of you puts up with a little bit of discomfort to have unity rather than peace?
Pass.
All right, I'll tell one that you've told me about in the past. You and Nicole, you and Nicole will sit and like binge like Netflix together, and sometimes you may watch a show that one or the other of you don't prefer, but you still do it together to have the togetherness.
Yes, that's actually a good. I don't know, Yes, that's true, but we don't have.
Because for me, I say that one because to you it may sound unremarkable, but to me it is, because sometimes my wife watches shows that I have a physical, negative reactions to, like make me feel nauseous.
Ugh.
Just like crime procedurals where they just have this asinine dialogue that sounds like it was written by monkeys on typewriters. No, I can't watch that, even to be near my wife.
My wife watched a couple episodes of Dr. Pimple Popper.
Oh my gosh. A great example. Like, no, I'm not doing this.
Actual physical aversion, yeah. No, we have conversations now about, I guess this is not the cold gravy thing, because we talk about what we want to watch and we try to identify shows that we think the other person would like be okay with. Because neither one of us wants to say, let's watch this show knowing that the other person doesn't want to. Even if I really, really want her to watch something. Like,
man. So back in the mid-'90s, my best friend and I used to go to Blockbuster to rent a couple of movies. And we would spend 3 hours in the store not being able to agree on what movie to watch. But that was kind of a fun activity all by itself.
Kids, Blockbuster was a building that you had to go to get movies. Kind of like streaming, except worse in every way conceivable.
Yeah. All right, Josh, you put a placeholder in here for a random thought. Do you have an idea to this, what to call this segment, or are we just going to call it Josh's random thought?
We can call it random thought for now, because I don't know how many of these I'm going to have. But this is one that when it happened to me, I stopped what I was doing, because it was I feel like it was profound. It's probably dumb, but okay. It shook me a little bit.
The internet calls these shower thoughts, even if they don't occur in the shower.
Funny enough, this one did occur in the shower.
Oh.
So I was thinking about, I don't know where I got this question from, but I was thinking, is there a limit to human thought? Okay?
What do you mean limit?
Like a bounds. Is there an upper boundary? Like is human consciousness truly infinite in an abstract concept, or is it limited? Are there
things we can't think of?
Yeah, no, yes. Is there all the things that humans could possibly ever think, is that a limited set or is that an unlimited set? That was the question I posed to myself.
Okay, I think I get the question.
But here's the thing. I started approaching it mathematically. And I was like, okay, well, let's just simplify.
Okay, great. Let's think of the highest number.
No, let's not think of the highest number. What I was thinking of is if we can condense the idea of a thought to words, because that's what we do when we communicate, okay?
Okay.
And so then how many?
Love this.
So how
creating
many?
An abstraction.
So you take the number of words that exist in existence, and that's a set that's constantly increasing, but it is finite. And then you can take that nearly infinite set, and then you that's one thought, and then you could string another word after it, and that is now a unique thought. So it's that limited, that huge set of all words times that set of huge words, and then as the string of words in your brain increases, then that increases, like approaches infinity, right?
Sure. I feel like any 7-year-old could do this. You'd be like, all right, the universe is finite, but it's expanding. What's it expanding into?
But here's the thing, is that is still a limited set. And as the string gets longer, as you have more thoughts in any kind of language, yeah, it approaches infinity, but it never gets there. It is still a finite thing. And this is where I blew my own mind. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, hang on, tangent before you do that.
Okay.
So when I was in college, like some calculus professor, when he was bored or had some extra time at the end of the lesson, he'd be like, "Did you know some infinities are larger than other infinities?" And then they show you mathematical proof on the board.
There are infinities that are bigger than other infinities. Yes, but that's not what we're talking about, because we're talking about finite sets of things.
Okay, so finite set, and you blew your own mind. Go ahead.
Okay. So even though it's an enormous, incomprehensibly large number, it is still finite if you're stringing words together in your brain. Okay? So here's my question to you, Ben.
Yeah.
Are we artificially limiting the scope of human thought by forcing it into the box of language? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Absolutely, it does.
I've said this before.
I think so. I feel like there's whole religions about what you just said.
Well, I've mentioned this before in the podcast. Is I feel like thoughts are so multidimensional things that exist in your brain, and yet we have to cram them into these words and these gestures and these tonalities in order to do our best to try to take that abstract thing and shove it into somebody else's head.
So 2 things came to mind while you're saying that. One is, when I was studying American Sign Language, I read a lot of books about the development of language, and there was always this curiosity surrounding what happens if you have a child that during the formative years of life where humans tend to develop language, they didn't. And there were a few odd case studies where they found some boy who'd been raised by wolves or something like that and didn't develop human language. And in their this is 18th century French medical doctors, but in their estimation was then no longer capable of it. Now, what does that mean as far as is he better than us? Can he think of things we can't think of because his brain isn't bounded by language? I think that there's something that has to happen inside the human brain in order to create concrete thoughts that has to resemble language.
I don't think that's true. But this is what I think. I think we're doing a trade-off. I think if that kid that was raised by wolves, maybe he does have more ginormous, multidimensional, complex thoughts than we are capable of having. But the trade-off is he can't even begin to try to share any of that with anybody on the one hand. And then on the other hand, he is also, even if his mind and his consciousness and his experience in this universe is expanded, he is losing the ability for the rest of humanity to give him quick and easy knowledge that he would otherwise have to earn himself. Okay. There's no YouTube video that he can go watch to learn how to raise tomatoes in his side garden. He has to learn it from scratch.
So you instantly gravitated towards the second thought I had when you said this, and that is, and I'm going into an area I know nothing about, I'm admitting that, the idea behind Zen Buddhism, where if you just sit still long enough and meditate, at some point you can transcend your mortal limitations and become one with the universe.
And that might actually be a thing. Who knows? If we are assuming that human thought, that the human consciousness is an unbounded thing, that we are constricting, artificially putting box around.
By tying it to language.
By tying it to this requirement to think. Now, this is tied to an idea that I've churned in my head for a very long time. You ever catch yourself doing an inner monologue, having a conversation with yourself?
All the time.
All the time. But there are some times when you're not. There are some times when you're doing things, but you've never had the actual word thoughts in your brain.
More often with me, if I'm having a dialogue in my head, it's with me, my residual self-image, and one of my simulations of someone else in my life. You, my wife, my kids, my boss, something like that.
So whenever I'm having these streams of word thoughts, or just I don't know what to call it, but when you're consciously thinking about strings of words that are strung together, I'm doing something. If I'm building something in the garage, okay, this is 8 by 5/8. I need to make this cut. I'm going to have to add this 1/8 of an inch for the saw blade diameter, blah, blah, blah. And it's just this running dialogue in my head. But there are other times when I'm performing a task where I can catch myself in this state where I haven't thought of a word, or there's nothing that's been going through the speech center of my brain for the last like half an hour or something. And I haven't lost my ability to function or do stuff. I just haven't thought the words. Does that make sense?
Yes, there's a name for this in psychology. They call it flow.
Oh.
I'll read you the definition. In positive psychology, flow, also known colloquially as being in the zone, is the mental state in which a person performing some activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in the process of the activity.
So what you're saying is my profound thought that I had the other day that knocked me nearly unconscious is a well-defined term that's taught to like Philosophy 101 students.
That's what I worry about when I think about writing a book. Like, I had this brilliant idea. I'm going to write it down. And then somebody will like pull down the map and whack it with a ruler and be like, that's already been discovered.
Thanks, teacher from the Truman Show. You were not helpful.
That was good. I think we should have Josh's shower thoughts more often.
I don't know how many profound shower thoughts I'm going to have. They're not all winners, Ben.
Okay, well, there's something else we need to talk about, Josh, and that is you bought a new keyboard this week.
The keyboard. Okay, so I don't want to tell the whole story of the keyboard. I'm actually writing an article. I'm in the middle. I have a draft on the site of a very detailed description of the thought processes that I have had in analyzing and shopping for a new computer keyboard.
It's important. You spend a lot of life with the keyboard, but I thought you liked your old one.
I did. I like my old one very, very much. But my old one is from 2007, 2008, something like that. And there has been a lot of improvements in keyboard technology since then. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lot that has changed.
Haven't you had those glasses since 2007?
No, this is like the 8th pair of glasses I've had since like 2007.
Right.
They just look the same because I get the same frame.
I was just trying to think of something you might still be using that you've had since 2007. That was the first thing that came to mind.
I've analyzed this in my life before. I think the oldest thing that is in my life that I still use on a daily basis is the electric toothbrush that I bought in 2002.
Okay.
The bristles are starting to wear down. I should probably replace those at some point.
That is so awesome that you had a well-thought-out answer to that question I just asked.
You totally skipped over my joke. Listeners, I have replaced the bristles on a very regular basis. That toothbrush is not actually 20 years old. Anyway, so the keyboard. I'll put a whole article up about my thought processes and like why I bought the thing. But so here's the thing about this keyboard, though. And I did have a thought that I wanted to bring up about it. Just this one thought for the podcast.
I was teasing you about the keyboard for no reason. I didn't have a good reason. I was just antagonizing you for no reason.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. So everybody jump on the bandwagon. The fun thing to do is make fun of me for spending money on a thing that I had already in my life that I admitted that I loved, and there was nothing wrong with it. I just wanted a new, fancier one. Yes, I'm fickle that way.
Yes.
I want to say this, though, is, Ben, here's a question, a philosophical question.
Okay.
If you don't know that you're being ripped off, are you being ripped off?
Okay, you've brought this up in the past, and I think it's great here on the Bad at Magic podcast that we take this back to magic. You brought up the idea that you became Robin Hood back in the era before people could know if they were getting ripped off in magic trades. And a trade, in order for it to be beneficial to both parties, has to be that both are receiving benefit from the trade. So even if Timmy New Gamer is trading a $20 card for a $1 card, if Timmy wants the $1 card and feels happy and doesn't want the $20 card and they make the trade, is he really getting ripped off? If Robin Hood Josh doesn't think so.
No, I do think so. I think somebody's getting ripped off because there is the one party is holding out information from the other party. Like if there's an advantage that one person has and they are taking that advantage in that situation to get more utility out of it.
But you just changed it from dollars to utility. And how do you measure the utility of Timmy wants that craw worm?
Well, I was Timmy in this scenario, but then 6 months later, I had evolved in my playstyle and realized that, oh yeah, that card was freaking amazing.
So what if you never found out?
I don't see how I wouldn't have found out.
Well, you asked if you didn't know if you're getting ripped off, then are you getting ripped off? So I'm going to stand by my principles here and say no.
Okay. Excellent, because I have a situation that happened with this keyboard where I dodged being ripped off, but I wouldn't have realized it. So here's the thing. I'm buying this keyboard direct from the manufacturer's website, okay? And I get to the last step, and it's shipping. And it says free shipping, 5 to 7 days. $5 for expedited shipping, 3 to 5 days, $10 for next day, and it was 1 to 2 days. And it was $10, okay?
Right.
I'm already spending too much on this. It's like barely approved by the spouse as it is, so I went with the free option, even though I wanted like this second because Amazon Prime has spoiled me for that. So I was expecting not to get this for 5 to 7 days. I wasn't expecting it to ship for 5 to 7 days. I was 2 full weeks is when I was expecting to get this thing. But then within an hour, I received an email. Your item has shipped. Here's the tracking number. And I clicked it and it said, oh, your item will arrive the day after tomorrow. 2 days.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so much about that. When you get a shipping range on a thing, that kind of goes back to what we talked about last time with the Apple tracker and your household goods being shipped. Like, is there a minimum amount of time? Like, yeah, they give you 5 to 7 days for the range, but does that mean they're obligated to hold it to make their more expensive options be valuable?
No, but they shouldn't be charging me $10 if it was going to get here in 1 to 2 days for free.
Okay, but let's say they exceeded their normal number of orders that day and they had to triage. What basis do they have for doing some before others?
I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, that like there is no guarantee that this will happen in every circumstance.
Okay, all right. So you ask if you know you're being ripped off. Let's say instead of being ripped off in money, you're being ripped off in time. Let's say that in order to maintain their hierarchical price structure, they will guarantee that no product that is chosen for free shipping ever arrives before the 5th day. They put it on a machine that just spins it around so that it doesn't actually leave the warehouse on time.
Honestly, Ben, that's the thought I had. Like when I got that email, I had this whole thought, like if I was running this company, I would literally build into the back end of my system. If they pick the free shipping, just have that invoice float for like 4 days in the system before it gets printed out on the warehouse floor.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
But that's what the people are paying for. Like if you're going to charge a premium for a service that you're just going to give away in best case scenarios anyway, that's ripping people off in that subset of time. Like if I had paid $10 for shipping, I wouldn't have known. I would have gotten the thing like, oh, that's outstanding. It's going to get here exactly when I expected it to.
So if you're a business and you're planning go ahead.
But that's just it. Like if I had paid the $10, I wouldn't have known I was being ripped off. But I didn't pay the $10 and I realized that the $10 was a ripoff.
But if they'd gotten 1,000 orders that day, the $10 guarantees yours is going out first.
I mean, guarantees in the loosest air quotes possible.
Okay, the $10 probably means yours is going out first.
I get what you're saying, but we're not talking about in the abstract or the multi-millions.
I get it. It's weird, though, because you and I in the same situation would have a completely different reaction to this. I would have chosen the free shipping option, and then when I got the notification it was coming, I'd go, free chicken. Like, great.
That's what I'm...
I can't believe they tried. I almost got ripped off paying $10 extra for this.
Let me be very clear about this. I was very happy that it showed up way before I was expecting it to, but it got me thinking about like the opportunity cost. What would have happened if I had paid? Like I'm always looking out for other consumers. I'm the good guy here, Ben. Don't you try to spin this as some pessimist.
All right. Anything else to say about your new keyboard?
It's got clicky optical switches, and it's just so great. I'll have a full review on the website.
Okay, so it's been a while since you posted a new one, but if you go to badatmagic.live, Josh has a section called Josh's Random Thoughts, and it sounds like we got a new article coming if you're interested in knowing more about the Razr something.
Huntsman Elite Full Keyboard. Goodness gracious. It's like you don't even read my text messages.
All right, Josh, it is time for Bad at Logic. And because we are on episode 65, that means it is time for you to choose a bias.
Because I'm odd and I am biased. So the bias that I chose today is the in-group bias. And the definition on the card are lovely cards from yourbiases.com, critical thinking cards, sponsor the podcast. You unfairly favor those who belong to your group. And Ben, I'm looking at you, buddy.
Is this just a nice way of saying racism, or does this transcend that?
So this is, I think racism is a subset of this.
Okay.
This applies across everything.
Bias.
It applies to people with shared experience, people that you talk to and know versus people you don't, people you in professions that you respect versus people that you don't. Anything that you know, because humanity, like as a species, when we were tiny furry mammals like scurrying away from predators in the jungle, like the ones that survived to propagate their species were the ones that were afraid of the dark, not the ones that thought, I wonder what's in that dark bush with the red glowing eyes over there.
Yeah, those ones didn't last very long.
Exactly. And so we have this...
Unless they lived in Madagascar and that's how we got capybaras or whatever.
Tasmanian devils that have like just no fear of anything. But it's like in your spinal column. This is like way down in the firmware of your brain that you are afraid of things that you don't know about. And then that, in our new like high level cognitive realm nonsense, whatever, translates to a bias where you are distrustful of things that you are not familiar with.
All right. So what do I have an in-group bias for?
LDS, obviously.
Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah,
You're totally right.
Yeah, if you could go anywhere on the planet Earth, and if somebody said, "Oh, I'm LDS," like you would immediately put them in the in group and have a ton of assumptions about their personality.
I'll do you one better than that, Josh. I'm very adept at picking up little cues that someone might be, and I'm immediately putting them in that group.
Ah, well, you know all the secret handshakes. I'm sure all of the meetings talk about ways to identify each other in public without really revealing your identity.
I'm going to send you an online quiz. It's called online quiz. It's called "What Kind of Mormon Are You?" I want you to take it because I want to know what kind of Mormon you are.
A bad one. Spoilers. No, I do suffer from the in-group bias, but
what is yours?
My in-group are the people that are living in my house right now. So I do my best to not be subject to this by making everybody the out-group. I distrust all of humanity, and I don't like all of you listeners. We love you to death, but I don't trust you farther than I could throw you.
Okay, this might be striking a little too close to the bone here, but I feel like you have an in-group bias for people with high IQs.
Ooh, probably. But how can you know that before you talk to them?
I don't know. So we just rewatched. Sometimes with my kids, we'll binge a series or something. Like for instance, I introduced them to the Mission Impossible movie series. They'd never seen any of them. We watched them all through end to end, and it was great. It was fantastic. It was a good time. So we just finished the Bourne series, the Matt Damon, Jason Bourne series. Uh-huh. So he had 4 movies, and then there was the 5th one that was like a spin-off of that was kind of happening at the same time with Jeremy Renner and other guys. And that was called The Bourne Legacy, and we were just watching that one. And towards the end, they revealed that Jeremy Renner's character barely got into the army because he was an idiot. Apparently had an IQ of like 78 or something like that, and the army will still take you. And they were giving him the blue pill, and the blue pill made him have an IQ of like 140, and if he stopped taking the blue pill, he was going to go back to 78, and he didn't want to do that. That was kind of what was driving him. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Spoiler alert for the Bourne Legacy.
And the Star Wars prequels. Because unless you stop taking your blue pills, those movies all suck.
Well, here on the Bad at Magic podcast, we take the blue pill. So it is time for Bad at English.
Hooray. What do our fellows across the pond say that's so cute today?
So this is a fun one because this is one where there's a niche in language where you need to fill it with something, and we have something different than what they do. And the phrase I'm talking about is fill your boots.
Fill your boots. Okay.
Fill your boots. The phrase fill your boots is typically used in place of what we might say knock yourself out.
Oh. Okay. Just like go nuts. Yeah, whatever.
Exactly. Go nuts. Go for it. Have at it. Go to town, help yourself. We use all those in America. In England, they say fill your boots. It means exactly what you think it does. I looked up the etymology. It's kind of like a 19th century Navy origin, perhaps having to do with getting your grog ration or rum ration.
Okay. Well,
it's loose.
But I honestly thought about asking you about the etymology of it, but then I thought, well, we say knock yourself out, and that doesn't make any sense either. So.
No, my wife and I had a discussion about that exact phrase. What do you think knock yourself out means?
I can only imagine it means drinking yourself into a stupor.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Are we doing the etymology research right now?
I can't think of what it would mean, where it would have come from. This hyperbolic expression alluding to knocking oneself unconscious with extreme effort dates from about 1930. It is often put negatively as don't knock yourself out. But in the mid-1900s, this doesn't make it clear. I don't know.
This is what happens when we do impromptu research on the podcast, Ben. Dang it. Now the listeners are left unsatisfied.
Why do you say knock yourself out if it means have a good time when it used to mean something negative?
I don't think it means go have a good time. I think knock yourself out means indulge in the thing that you are looking at.
Apply oneself to the point of exhaustion?
It's like if my kids ask, hey, can we go play on the playground? I would say knock yourself out. And that is like, yes, not only may you go play on the playground, you may expel literally all of the energy that you have in your bodies.
Until you are unconscious. So if you were British, you would say, sure, fill your boots.
Fill your boots. I'm going to say that to my kids, and they're just going to stare at me.
Josh, it is time for our main segment today, and we are going to be talking about the book Artemis by Andy Weir.
So, spoilers, everyone, for Artemis by Andy Weir, and also for Star Wars, if we haven't already. And I will say, Ben, that I did read this book a week before I was supposed to.
Are you trying to tell me that you're rusty? Because you remember everything, Josh. So I don't know what you're talking about.
So you've stumbled on one of my tricks to life, Ben, is I'm setting, like Scotty from Star Wars, I'm setting low expectations, so that way when I exceed all of them, I just look like a genius.
Yeah, well, okay. Your expectations are duly set low. So let's talk about Artemis.
All right. So typically in the Bad at Magic system, the way that we break these things down is you do some meta commentary about like surrounding the book. I do my best to talk about the story before we actually dive into butts and this. But who wants to go first this time?
So Artemis by Andy Weir it came out in 2017. It was kind of his follow-up to his first book called The Martian, which came out in 2015. So it's like the first follow-up book for an author that had a big first hit.
Ooh, that's a dangerous book to write.
It is kind of. So I wouldn't say he knocked it out of the park, but it wasn't terrible. I really loved The Martian, which is why I was willing to read this.
Oh, so you're holding it up to his previous works.
So my wife was worried about this. She was like, hey, I want to say something. I know how much you love that book, so I'm just trying to set your expectations low because I think you can enjoy this book as long as you don't have your expectations too high.
That's the thing, is if you're going to view this through the lens of some other intellectual property that you love to death, then you might have a bad time. You always, the independent stories, man, you got to come in with like a blank slate.
Yeah. Okay, well, give us a plot synopsis.
All right, so in general, like the plot follows your standard 3-act structure, and it even has an excellent hook at the beginning. Like the first chapter opens with our protagonist, her name is Jasmine something or other.
She goes by Jazz.
She is the book opens with her in the middle of an EVA disaster. Like she is walking on the surface of the moon, in a spacesuit, and she's having
extravehicular
activity. Yeah, an EVA. They say it all the time. They never said the full acronym, which I did. Thank you for respecting your readers, knowing what an EVA is. Extravehicular activity. Anytime you're in space and you're not in a spaceship, that's an EVA. And she was in the middle of a cataclysmic malfunction and was going to die. She was going to die with no oxygen on the surface of the moon. And it was just this harrowing chapter of her at a dead sprint through lunar gravity back to the habitat, one of the domes of the city.
Before she expelled all of her oxygen into the environment and died a horrible death.
Yes. And this was the great hook because, they set the action high. We set the stakes. We got to see, it was kind of clever.
James Bond opener.
It was clever because it gave the author the opportunity.
Introduces the environment, the character, teaches some things we need to know.
Yes. The baseline setting for where this is all taking place. It's on the moon. There's a city. There are several domes. They're kind of governed. We'll get to that. After we find out that she was on a test to try to become an EVA instructor so she could take out tours and things and try to earn like buku bucks. Like this is the job that she wants. And she failed miserably because her equipment failed. And how dare your equipment fail when you're trying to like save other people's lives? Yeah. And so then we get introduced to her actual profession, and she's a porter. And her job is she literally takes items from one place to another. Another thing we're going to have a discussion about. And in the process of her doing that, we also are introduced to the concept that she's a smuggler. She has some kind of connections where she can...
If you got somebody who's above the table job is bringing stuff around. Why not also have them get you things you need?
She somehow has the connections and has worked the process so she can get illicit, not approved materials through
contraband
through the process and get them onto the city of Artemis and sell them at a premium to her buyers.
So this is set in the near future. The way we're supposed to examine is that Earth kind of stayed on trajectory, didn't go like cataclysmic or anything like that, but we just reached the level of technology and science where we're ready to start a colony on the moon because there's benefits to being there. There's tourism, potential, elements that we could have access to, and then we had the transportation problem got solved where we could just run ships back and forth to the moon at a nominal cost compared to the value it presents.
Yes, and we'll talk about that in depth too. So we find out through her illicit context that Jazz is hired to do an illicit job. There is basically an organized criminal who has above the board lots of businesses, but below the board he's going to try to take out his competition on the moon. And
what was that guy's name?
I don't remember. It was some Russian name. I want to say Victor, but that's probably not right. Trond. So Trond wanted to take over both the aluminum producing and because of chemistry, the oxygen generation business on the moon. And he had a whole plan to do that, and it started with destroying his competition's ability to function. And so he hires Jazz to do a black ops mission to go blow up their harvesters.
Sabotage the competition.
Yes. And
he deliberately chooses her, one, because he thinks he can do it, and two, if it goes wrong, he needs a fall guy.
Fall woman in this case, yeah.
And he tells her right to her face, I will disavow you.
Yeah, which honestly, that's very respectful. If you're going to have a black operative, let them know what they're getting themselves into. So, right. I mean, they were very respectful of each other. If you're talking about an illicit, illegal partnership, they were very above board with all that. Good criminal morals in this book.
Yeah. So, and I like how in this exchange where he's trying to sell her on his plan, that she's like, "Well, that would be wrong," and he's like, "Well, I'll give you 1,000,000 credits," and she's like, "Where do I sign?"
That was multiple times in this book. She would have an internal monologue where it's like, well, this is wrong, and then list out all the ways that this goes against her moral fiber, and then it's illegal and how it could all go bad. And then somebody says a sum of money that instantly overrides all of those objections. So
let's talk about this. Let's put her on a 3x3 alignment, D&D alignment grid.
Oh, 100% lawful evil.
Lawful evil?
Oh, yes.
See, I think true neutral or chaotic neutral.
Definitely not chaotic neutral, because she does adhere to her own set of moral standards. Several times throughout the book, she deliberately avoids making a promise or entering into a transaction because she knows she's not going to be able to fulfill her expectation of it. At one point, she was posing as a prostitute, and the guy was going to pay her, and she said, "No, pay me afterward," because her own ethic, if she took the money, she would need to fulfill the obligation.
Yes. Okay. So I get what you're saying, and I think you said this before when we've talked about this in the past, but I feel like it's not right. I think if you always define the character's point of reference as their basis for determining lawfulness, that it would be 2-dimensional instead of 3-dimensional.
No. All right. So you're missing the two axes. All I'm saying is on the lawful versus chaotic spectrum, she is lawful. Now we can have.
I don't think she is.
Oh, you think she's chaotic? Okay, make your case, sir.
Okay, so like you said, she has these multiple competing moral codes. She has her Orthodox Muslim upbringing that she got from her father. She has the laws of the colony that she lives in, and then she kind of has her loose, almost like thieves code. And she tries to articulate it several times. Like later on, she's trying to sell to the mayor of the town, if you will, the administrator, that she's good to have around because she may be a smuggler, but she's your kind of smuggler.
Yeah, I don't bring guns. I don't bring illicitly hard drugs. I don't bring all the really, really bad stuff that could be here. It doesn't, because I'm controlling it.
I'm breaking the law, but you like the way I'm breaking the law. I don't know. I just think that she belongs more in the neutral space when it comes to her adherence to law.
But this is where you're missing it. Lawful and chaotic is not about adherence to an external law. It's adherence.
I got it.
It's adherence to rules. It doesn't matter what the source of those rules are.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying if you always use the character themselves as the point of reference for determining their lawfulness, then it'll be a flat line.
That's not true. You have characters that obey the law. You had a constable in this book who I would absolutely also call lawful good.
His name was Rudy.
Rudy, who was a mounted,
muscular Canadian Mountie.
Yeah, he was a Mountie that got sick of all the red tape and wanted to be the one sheriff on the moon city, and he just got to walk around and beat up criminals. But multiple times, he knows that she's guilty of all of these different things. But
okay,
he adhered.
I'm going to try to explain it one more time.
Okay,
Rudy would say that he is adhering to his moral code. Jazz would also say that she is adhering to her moral code.
Yes.
So if you're saying that they're determining whether or not they're lawful is whether or not they're consistent with their own code, then both of them are equal lawfulness.
Yes, they are both equally lawful.
But every character ever is of equal lawfulness by that measurement.
That's not true.
Of course, everyone is consistent with their own internal rule set.
No, they're not. There are characters that exist.
All right, give me an example of a character in this intellectual property that doesn't adhere to their own internal rule set.
Character in this intellectual property. Give me a second. The guy. All right, so there was the guy, the person that catalyzed the whole plot that was happening in the first place. It was the Chinese guy that...
that's a good example. I don't have his name. Hang on, let me look. Jin Chu?
Something like that.
Jin Chu. He was a weasel. He was working both sides. I wrote down that he was true neutral.
Yes, he is not lawful because the reason that this conflict took place in the first place is because Trond understood that there was more to be gained by taking over the aluminum manufacturing processes on the moon because of the information that he had bought from this third party guy. What's his name again?
Jin Chu.
Jin Chu. For the stuff that he got from Jin. But the problem is then Trond went into this with good faith thinking that Jin was talking only to him. But then Jin started talking to everyone else, and Jin started selling the information that he had gotten from Trond to the people that he was going to go sabotage, which clued them in, which caused this whole friction and all these mass murders in the first place. So Jin Chu is chaotic because he's out for himself, and he doesn't care who he hurts. It doesn't matter what happens. He's just he saw an opportunity to go make money. He made a deal. I am selling this to you. We are in a partnership, and then turned around and immediately just backstabbed him.
So are you saying that Jin Chu wouldn't say that what he did was consistent from his own moral point of reference?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. If you're defining someone's lawfulness on the morality 3x3 grid based on their own definition of their own moral code, then it's going to be a flat line.
We are only talking about the x-axis. We're only talking about lawful versus chaotic here. Okay,
right?
And no, but
if you give everybody x equals 0, then
you're missing it. It's not from the character's perspective. It's the laws that they derive is from the character's perspective. That's what makes them lawful. But from an external perspective, from our objective observation of the character, do they adhere to some kind of code? It doesn't matter what the source is, whether it's internal or external, it is irrelevant in this scenario. Do they adhere to a set of codes?
I would say that Jazz's code did not meet that definition of lawful. She is chaotic. At least neutral.
No, the things that she did, the things that she was willing to do, that moves her on the y-axis from good to evil. But she still had she made a deal with Trond to do bad things, and she knew that they were bad things, and she was going to do them anyway because she made the deal. That makes her lawful.
Yeah, I really had some problems with this.
Some moral problems?
Yeah, I totally did.
Because you're dealing with a lawful evil person. The lawful part appealed to you, but the evil was grinding against you. And you want to label her as chaotic because you don't want her to be on the same x-axis as you are in this conundrum.
Yeah, I think she was chaotic neutral.
Ben.
Anyway, I rank lower than you on the lawfulness spectrum when we took that quiz. So there were some themes that kind of recurred throughout this book, and that was one of them, was, people's morality kind of clashing up against each other. Like, she understood the cop, and she respected him because he was consistent. She knew what to expect from him. She knew she could count on him to do his job, Rudy. But she didn't want to, she didn't want to be vulnerable to him because she knew he would enforce the law on her, and she didn't think, in her moral code, the law didn't apply to her.
She did have some very inappropriate thoughts about him because apparently he was very athletically built and very attractive.
Okay, let's take a tangent on that. So I noticed right away that we have a white male who chooses his protagonist an Arabian female.
Okay.
Raised in a Muslim home. Now, that's really brave as far as I'm concerned, because if you write about what you know, and I don't know what it's like to be a woman, I don't know what it's like to be raised Muslim, and I don't know what it's like to be Saudi Arabian. Like, he was already really putting himself in a dangerous spot by choosing her as his protagonist.
I get what you're saying, but he did get to abstract a lot of that away by saying that like she grew up primarily on the moon in this kind of melting pot culture, and she was always
so
straying
that just
away
gave him
from
like a get out of jail free card where he didn't actually have to adhere to any of those things he assigned to her.
Exactly. So then the only perspective shift that he had to make for writing her was the male to female.
Yeah. Okay. Are you familiar with the meme of male authors writing female characters who boobily move along?
I'm not aware of that.
It's this idea that men don't know anything about what it's like to be a woman, and so they describe it awkwardly in a way that a woman would never think of. There was a little bit of that in this book.
Name a part, because I thought this. I felt like
there was one morning where she'd gotten up, and I think she was hungover, and she was getting dressed, and he was describing her body, and the things she was thinking about. I bet if I'd read it out loud to my wife, she'd be like, "Yeah, a woman would never think that. That's a man writing about what a woman would think."
Okay, I don't remember this specific passage, so I'm not going to call you down for it. Yeah. But all right, so tips to authors: if you're trying to write somebody of the opposite gender, just write it as gender neutral. Like in 99% of your interactions, like with yourself and your internal monologue, your gender never comes into play.
Yeah, I'll see if I can make an infographic about that. So Jasmine is this bilingual Saudi. She smuggles, she sabotages, she's loyal to whoever pays her best, but she has her limits, her things she won't do. But she swears, she drinks, she does drugs, she sleeps around. You
made all those things sound bad.
I may be a smuggler, saboteur, and all-around jerk, but I won't leave my EVA suit dirty, she said. That was the actual quote.
Well, and, I mean, that just speaks to her character, right? Like, she knows what she is. Like, she is the classic outlaw living in the Wild West, which is what this book most closely resembled to me, is a random Western.
I get that. She also has this ethic. It's an interesting ethic. It's a never wrong ethic, even though you learn and develop. You could say I'm never wrong and be stuck and never move, but she learns, but then because she's never wrong, and I wrote down another quote, back when I used to be stupid.
Everybody thinks that about themselves. Come on.
Right. You do. You reminded me of her in that respect. But it could have been something stupid she did yesterday. Oh yeah, back when I was stupid. But now I know. And then tomorrow when what I did today was stupid. Well, yeah, but that was back when I used to be stupid.
Okay. You totally derailed my plot synopsis.
All right, go ahead.
She goes to do the sabotage mission. It goes wrong. She only gets it half done. Turns out the people she's sabotaging is a company that is owned by
mob,
Earthside Colombian mobsters, and
Brazilian. Yes.
And they start sending like assassins and stuff at her. Like they kill Trond and his whole, like almost his whole like organization. They are going after her and her family. She runs into an assassin a handful of times, and now the conflict is how do we stop this?
And gets away because she's good at everything.
And I have a bullet about that specifically. So then they like kind of rally. It's like, okay, well now we have the Brazilian mob that's going to take over the station when this new technology drops, and we don't want them to be in charge. This is our city. We need to rally the people and make a plan and get them off of our moon. And then they do it and they pull it off. And then there's this horrible twist where almost everyone dies and she has to save everyone. And she does, and it's the mega happy ending, and I just shook my head the whole last chapter like, seriously, this is not how any of this would happen in the real world.
I know. I was disappointed, too.
Okay. All right. That's the plot. Let's break it down.
That's the plot synopsis. Okay, so there's a lot of themes that are going on here. So we've got all the characters, and they're interesting characters. You know, we've named a few of them so far. There's a few more we'll get into here. But the themes that are going on, we've got what is humanity like? Like, yeah, we're in this exotic foreign environment, but what things are true about humanity that would be true anywhere? And I liked that when he was kind of exploring these ideas. Like, yeah, if we took and made a colony on the moon, we'd still have some of the same problems we had on Earth.
Oh, there was a lot of self-segregation. There was a lot of specialization. There was a lot of hiring who you know, not who's best for the job. Very much the political infighting. Yeah, that was very
prostitution true. Popped up almost immediately. Smuggling, you know, the kind of things you would have on Earth anyway.
Exactly.
Another thing this author does that I actually really get a kick out of is nerd debates. He'll just throw one out there. Like, they don't even fit really, but sometimes he just throws one out there. Like, for instance, at one point they were debating over how many aliens Captain Kirk slept with in the original Star Trek series.
Yes, there was.
And I did not realize there was controversy surrounding this, but apparently it's 2 or 3, depending on how you measure.
Well, there's that the controversy isn't how many aliens Kirk slept with. It's that the perception that Kirk was just out there sleeping with anything that had 2 legs and moved. In reality, he only slept with a couple, which is still a lot when you're talking about another species. Like, if you heard of a person, he only slept with a couple of different animals, that person would still be thought about differently.
Yeah. Do they? That reminds me of a joke I heard about a man sitting pondering his life, and he's like, I built that bridge over there. Do they call me Igor the bridge builder? I built that barn over there. Do they call me Igor the barn builder? But you screw one sheep.
That's a classic.
Yeah. All right. So more nerd debates. I think they named her code on her safe was 1701. So we were supposed to shoot.
I actually knew that. Like the USS NC-1701, that was the serial number of the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah, so she knew the person. I think she was trying to break into a safe or something like that.
It was Jin's safe in the hotel, and she put dust on the fingerprint buttons to see where the oils of his skin were, and it was 170.
And it was a Star Trek clue.
Yes.
Okay, great. There was at one point they were debating over the color of Han Solo's pants.
Yes, if it had a stripe on it or not.
Spoilers for Star Wars, they were blue.
We did it! And there was and there was one stripe on the side.
Yeah, and a stripe on the side. There was also he made a point to debunk the popular action movie trope that small people can beat up big people.
Yes, and he talked about how there was a big assassin or a big Rudy, and like she did her best to get away from this guy, and there was just no dice. It was not happening.
Yeah. Okay, so humanity, nerd debates. There's also this theme throughout the book of economy.
Economy.
How an economy works and how it would be on the moon, what the currency was, what the driving forces were, how everything interrelated.
Okay, credit where it is due. They had a separate pseudo currency in this moon city called slugs. And the idea is that it translated directly to how much mass that you could have shipped to you from Earth.
I loved it.
That is a clever pseudo currency to have, but I'll take it one step further. This is where I'm giving the author credit. They realized the opportunity here is that organizations from Earth could then, through the internet or through telecommunication or through physical presence, could translate their currency into this pseudo currency that the moon base used with people that were locally on the moon, and then translate it back into any other currency they wanted, into any other account that they wanted, and it's like perfect money laundering for anyone on the planet.
Right, which hence the presence of the mob on the planet.
Yeah. Okay. My whole theme, this whole book, is that this guy wanted to write a Western, and he set it on the moon without realizing that screws up what the Western is about.
See, you call it a Western. I didn't feel that. I felt like, okay, so we set up our conflict, we set up our environment, and now we set up the need for a caper. We've got an antagonist that talks to our protagonist and says, hey, I need you to sabotage these 4 mining machines so that I can stop the competition and bring it to town. I get the Western themes there, but really it was a caper.
I mean, the story was a caper, but the setting was a pseudo-lawless town.
Okay,
with a bunch of crime.
The old sheriff in town, and the new guy comes in, and he wants to take over, but he needs the old guy to get run out of town first.
Right. There's all this underhanded dealing going on, and there's the sheriff that's just making sure people aren't dying in the street, but there's still all this crime that everybody basically knows is happening. But the fact that it was set on the moon caused so many problems, including, let's go back to the economy that we're talking about, because we're sticking with the economy.
Okay.
It makes no sense to have private citizens on the moon at all. That how can that be a thing? You can't she had an apartment. It was a tiny little box.
I got it. He kind of said this. All right. So we're on the moon. We're mining for metals, but really probably our chief industry, at least initially, until the one key thing at the end of this book pops up, is tourism. And when you bring tourists to the moon, they need people to make them food. They need people to make their bed. They need people to drive them around. They need people to take them on EVAs. They need people to take them to the moon landing site.
You are not going to dissuade me from the acknowledgement that yes.
You think this could all be robots?
No. Labor does need to be involved, and this labor needs to be people. A lot of this labor needs to be people, not all of it. In this future setting, there's absolutely no need for people to physically carry boxes from one side of the station to the other.
Right.
There has to be. We're almost there with drones. If Bezos would stop messing around.
Right. There should just be tunnels or something.
Yeah. Any number of ways to solve this problem. I
was okay with the fact that she was a courier.
Whatever. What I am saying is that she wouldn't just be there. Like, there is no possibility of being jobless or homeless on the moon. That shouldn't exist.
I agree with you there. I think every single person there has a function.
They would have to.
If you don't, you go back to Earth.
You would have to. Every cubic centimeter of that entire city would be owned by somebody. And if you can't just like fly up there and like, oh, I guess I'll find an apartment and get a job. That's not a thing. You know how many people are on the planet Earth that would be dying for the opportunity to go there? You would have to have the job and the apartment first.
Okay. So this goes back to the humanity thing. If we've created now a colony where humans can live freely, as soon as that happens, humans form romantic connections and begin to reproduce, and it introduces a whole new set of problems.
You're missing it. This is the Western thing again. If you have a town in the Old West, yeah, immigration is a thing. People come out there to make their livelihoods all the time. That's a thing that happens. But what the baseline assumption that allows that to happen is that there's virtually unlimited space and room for expansion. The city Artemis is 5 domes on the moon. There is a maximum threshold. Like we can have this many people and not one more.
You're right. There was like an assumption like, oh, if you just want to have a baby, that's no problem. You're already a resident of the moon.
Exactly. Like that cannot exist because there's this upper limit. Every person in that place would have a defined job. And if you lost that job, you would get shipped off of the moon and replaced with somebody else to do your job for you.
So if you got pregnant, should they ship you home?
Absolutely. This is an HR thing that happens. You have to fill out forms if you have romantic entanglements with other employees.
So that was a hand-wavy thing that was necessary for all of the other things that happened.
Yes, because the story requires us to have free, independent acting and thinking people.
So at some point, he decided he wanted economies to be enough of a theme that he said something really interesting I'd never heard before. It was in a rant given by the administrator. And she talked about the life cycle of economies. Do you remember this rant?
I do remember the rant. And the middle stage is where they're capitalists and everybody's booming and there's this growth. And then they just die and collapse and spin off separate economies.
Separate economies that then grow and form their own, and it's the circle of life for economies. That was an interesting idea. I'd never heard of it expressed like that.
I've expressed that idea to you constantly. Like, our economy would end in 3 companies owning everything in our existence, but the government has to make stops to prevent the economy from aging to that point.
She said that, and then she said, and then it devolves into chaos and it breaks apart, and then those form new economies and it starts over. That's the part you didn't say.
Well, that's because I don't want to acknowledge the fact that we're on the downhill slope of America.
And maybe that's why you didn't say that. At the end, there's this genie out of the machine kind of thing where they realize that there's something they can do on the moon that they couldn't do on Earth. And I loved it. I loved this thing, Josh.
Theoretically, all right, so the idea, I'll give them this. Like, this is kind of hand-wavy, and I don't know if like any of the material science makes any sense. But the concept is that they could create a fiber optic cable with a very specific process with very specific ingredients in low gravity. That was the key ingredient, is This process will only work in sub-Earth gravity, which then makes the moon the only place that you could viably manufacture this miracle IT technology. And
that has zero attenuation, which, if you don't understand, it's the holy grail of communications. That you could have a cable that you could put from one point on Earth to any other point on Earth and not lose any signal over the length of the cable.
And listeners, if you don't think that's a big deal, try to buy a 10-foot DisplayPort cable and see how many you go through before you find one that works.
Yeah. So we can't even get 10 foot with no attenuation. This is supposed to be unlimited.
Yeah, miles
distance.
and miles.
Yeah, we have to have repeaters on the floor of the ocean because fiber optics aren't sufficiently advanced to be able to transverse that level of distance without repeaters. Okay, so yeah, they called it Zaffo. That was the magic thing. That's all I had to say about economy. There was also a theme of multiculturalism, which I thought was kind of interesting. You know, we had the Canadians and the moon culture and the Saudis and all there was some Russians and the Brazilians but the moon became this melting pot of sorts. Why wouldn't it be?
Well, and it was interesting. I loved that the space agency that kind of ran the show here was based in Kenya, because it was just a country that realized one of the most valuable resources they had for the planet is
their land that's on the equator.
They're on the equator, which makes it much easier to get stuff into orbit. Which, listeners, if you weren't aware, this is why we launch things out from Florida. We're trying to get as south as possible. You need orbital mechanics. Go play Kerbal Space Program. It's easier if you're launching from the equator.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so you had the Kenyans had established themselves. It was almost like Wakanda in this book, that they had something that no one else had. They became this high-tech spaceport, and her contact on Earth that helped smuggle all her stuff was Kenyan.
All right, so this was an interesting detail. Another point that I liked about this book is that at the beginning of each chapter, we got this little snippet of
email.
Like emails, it was basically Jazz, as a little kid in school, was assigned a pen pal on Earth, and so then they were just pen pals, like you do when you're a kid, right? But then she just kept actually talking and writing letters to this person.
Some boy in Kenya.
Some boy in Kenya. And as they both grew up, she is now working on the moon trying to make a living, and he has a job as a loadmaster for like the cargo that goes to the moon. And it's just great how you eventually realize that, oh, this is how her whole smuggling thing like happened, because this guy's constantly writing about his family struggles and how they're pushing to try to get money to make their situation better.
I like that too. I think his name was Kelvin.
It was really well done, because it was just such a natural evolution of that makes perfect sense of how the smuggling operation started.
Yep, I liked it too. Okay, so yeah, then there was the smuggling, where there was a conflict. Like her father was like, "I thought I raised you better than that," but it also is what gave her a lot of her abilities that made her. She was resourceful. She knew lots of people. She could get you things. Yeah, it was what placed her in the center of the conflict.
No, that was happenstance. She met the guy that she needed to meet because she was a smuggler. The reason that she became involved in the conflict is because Trond recognized that she was the protagonist of this book, and anything that she touched, she was instantly an expert on and knew how to operate. And it was
all right. It is time for your rant on that, Josh. Go for it.
To a sickening degree. Okay. I understand that if you're on the moon, there's a lot of things that you're going to know that other people don't. Like the fact that she was a little more machine savvy, like mechanical savvy than other people. Okay, that makes sense.
She was also raised as an apprentice welder.
She was raised as an apprentice welder. She was training to become an EVA master, so it makes sense that she would know about certain systems, life support, that kind of stuff.
But she failed her EVA test, like legitimately just failed it.
Not because she did anything wrong. She actually saved her own life in that scenario, but because her equipment failed, because she failed to do, basically, she didn't have enough money to pony up to get good stuff, and she bought it secondhand.
Okay.
But where the author lost me, is when she went to her buddy, who was a scientist in the electronics, Svoboda, who's a great character. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I love that character.
And she handed him hey, can you make this for me? I need this thing. And he looked at it and he goes, did you make this? Yeah, I didn't have he's like, it's really sloppy. And she goes, well, I just did it last night. And he goes, you did this in a night? Where did you learn this? She goes, oh, I read a couple of articles and watched a YouTube video. And the thing that she was designing, Ben, go with me. If it was like a timer, if it was going to be like a clock timer or a kitchen timer or something, that's what I was expecting. And I was like, okay, fine. You could probably figure out. I went to 2 semesters of electrical engineering at the academy to figure out how to make the clock radio. And it took that long to figure it out.
Yeah, this is like when I read
She designed a little robot that would attach to her phone and actually swipe the page and send emails and actually do stuff on the phone.
Yeah, so that they would think, so she'd have an alibi that she was in her room.
That is genius level electrical engineering, and you can't.
That was where you got off.
That's where you lost. That is now. This person has ascended to magic. There is no There's no way in reality that anyone would be able to do that
That was the magic system of this book. Soft magic F-.
Unless this person is Tony Stark, this makes no sense.
Okay. Well, we do get a lot of that hand-wavy technology stuff from Tony Stark. When did you do this? Last night. I made 4 new suits. They all do different things.
I had I thought of a concept. I had my fabricator just do it. I made a new element in my house over the weekend.
One thing I like about this author, Andy Weir, that was true in The Martian is also true in this book, is occasionally he'll take time to just, let me teach you some stuff about science. And he's not just making it up, like he went and did some research about like the angle of incidence if you were on the moon, where the Earth would appear in the sky kind of thing. Like you can tell he actually bothered to just look it up and figure it out, even though we don't currently have a colony. And one of the things he did that on was a bit of history. So he talked about the history of the Apollo program and the moon landings and filled in a few blanks I'd always had. For instance, where did we put the flags on the moon and what do they look like now? I love that he just took some time to explain this.
I actually knew that already. The fact that because we just took up normal flags the first couple of times. And
the first one we knocked over on the way out.
Because we put it way too close to the jettisoning or the lunar module that when it went back into lunar orbit to get captured and go back to Earth.
And then, we have like 9 flags on the moon. And the rest of them, any that were exposed to the sun would be bleached within a week or 2.
Completely white because there's no protection from solar radiation.
So yeah, we've got 10 flags on the moon. One of them's buried in the dust, and the other 9 are bleached white.
Yep,
that was awesome. There was a theme of privacy that kind of occurred throughout the book. So every character had what was called a gizmo, which is roughly equivalent to a smartphone.
A smartphone with a couple extra bells and whistles on it.
Yeah. It could track your position. It gave you access to areas. You were controlled areas. You used it for currency transactions. Anything I'm missing?
It had like some kind of RFID or identifying feature. Like it was assigned to you as a person, and then you would use it to unlock doors and things. Like the computer would register, this gizmo belongs to this person. This person has this level of access to these areas.
So then there was this expectation of privacy by people. Like, yeah, I'm using it for all those things, but the rest of the time you shouldn't be able to use it to track what I'm surfing on the internet, what I'm doing with my money, where I'm currently located, all those kinds of things. And of course, hijinks ensue.
Well, because this is it should have been a privately owned city, and like all of the technology that they're using is owned by the company that runs it. The currency that they're using is owned by the company that runs it. So of course they're tracking all of everything all the time, because why wouldn't you? You have an interest to make sure this crap doesn't take place on your moon colony that you paid a lot of money for.
Yeah, so this is typical. I would call it a trope in ones like this, where there's some point where our protagonist who's kind of low on the totem pole, and there's these mysterious high-powered forces, and they realize they're being tracked.
Well, yeah, and it's just she immediately like rips the battery out of her phone. That's what you do.
Right.
Like that's just known information, Ben. Do you not take the battery out of your phone when you go to sleep at night?
So there's also surveillance cameras, activity logging, all these kinds of things. So there was themes throughout of privacy, and I enjoy examining ideas about problems we're struggling with now in some separated futuristic scenario. Like, yeah, I can relate to not wanting to have my movements tracked, and even though I'm not going to sabotage aluminum mining rigs on the moon, I could see how that might apply to me as a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, there's so many lines that you can draw, because for every scenario that you come up with where it's completely inappropriate for the government to track your location, there's also a scenario on the other end of the spectrum where it makes perfect sense that the government should have this capacity as long as they pinky promise to only ever use it for good. The fact of the matter is either you...
What's really keeping them honest?
There is a sliding scale, or people want to think that there is a sliding scale, but the reality is it doesn't. If you're not right in the middle, then you're going to be sliding one way or the other. And like our desire is
right. It's easy to come up with scenarios like if you're valuing privacy above everything, what about this scenario? What if someone's dying and we can't find them? Shouldn't we be able to look up their code and go find their location?
What if the terrorist has set up a nuclear bomb in some city and he's dead and the disarming code is on his phone, but his phone is encrypted?
Right. Yeah, great. Good examples at the really far end of the spectrum. So does privacy reign supreme? Does the public good reign supreme? Who gets to make the call? these are tough issues. I enjoy examining them in the fishbowl of a fictional story.
In the abstract. Yeah, we don't have to go into the details of where we lie on public versus private information.
There was a little bit on organized crime. What, will it always exist? What's its role in society? Should it be stopped? Should it be tolerated?
You can't get rid of it. They just changed names. Las Vegas was created by organized criminals. It's still run by organized criminals, but instead of mob bosses, they're just CEOs. It's the same job description, just different titles.
And then there's the city itself. And you kind of talked about it. Population 2,000, no police station, 5 domes. There's this constant influx and outflux of tourists as well as workers and migrants, and kind of the idea that they couldn't really control who was coming or leaving and why. And so if the mob wanted to send a bunch of guys, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it.
That right there blows my mind. The fact that this is you have to get on a freaking rocket ship that is owned by a private organization in a foreign country, in one country, to get here. How is it possible that you can't control who actually gets up here? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's but they're...
You're right. There was kind of this hand-wavy thing about lack of central control over all of this.
Transportation specifically. People coming and going from the station just wasn't under anyone's control. It was just assumed it was like catching a bus. And that's completely not true in this scenario, but it had to be in order for the plot to take place. So I guess at the first whiff of this organized crime syndicate sending assassins to the station, the administrator would have made one phone call and just kicked everybody off of the next ship up there until we sort out who's actually who.
Yeah, and you're right. That was a bit of a hand-wavy thing that the administrator didn't have that power. She was more of a diplomat than a authority.
In the weirdest way, because she doesn't really own anything. Nobody on the station has any voting rights. Sections of it have been acknowledged as being owned by one company or another that are mostly Earth-based. I'm
glad he didn't write the version you're talking about, because I do not want 2 chapters on moon politics.
Well, there would be no moon politics. It would be 2 or 3 large organizations at most that owned everything on the moon, including the people, and they were constantly it wouldn't be scheming or murders.
I feel like I've seen this anime and I didn't like it. I get what you're saying, but I'm glad this wasn't that story.
But this is the story I'm saying is what really will happen. There's never going to be a free moon base. People aren't going to band together and create a free colony on the moon because the resources to get there are too high.
Okay, let's talk about that, because that was the last theme I had here, and that was the science of living on the moon.
Yeah, and it's not there.
I get it, but I enjoyed that he took some time trying to imagine it. This was his imagination filling in the details.
Let me backtrack from what I just said. The technology to live on the moon exists today in a very real and a very feasible way. What doesn't exist is the desire to pour the amount of resources necessary to make it a reality.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we put man on the moon a dozen times back in the 60s. Have we not improved since then?
We have. The thing is, there's no economic impediment to do so. In order to get the raw material to the moon that you would need in order to construct a settlement to permanently sustain 2,000 people would be astronomical in a very real sense.
Yes. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about some of the things in some of the pseudoscience and some of the real science behind it. For instance, the domes that you mentioned, he talked about how thick the steel would need to be, and they were double reinforced, and then all the protections that would have to be in place to detect breaches and what to do about them if they occurred. I found that all really interesting.
Almost like living on a submarine, honestly, is you just have to be monitoring air pressure everywhere and have sectioned off places. So if there was a leak that was penetrated, then you just seal off the area until you can fix it.
Right.
And sucks to be you if you're stuck in there at the time.
There was also the problem of all right, if we have humans up there, you can't exactly just plant potatoes in the soil. So what are you going to eat? And the answer was algae.
Which, of course, that's the answer. You have some kind of single-celled organism that reproduces in a ridiculously quick rate. And then if you have just a little bit more genetic engineering knowledge than we have right now, you can make it different or nutritional or flavorful. All kinds of possibilities.
Yeah. So I like this, that they had it and they would form algae and dry it or create it in paste or add flavorings or colorings, and they called it gunk. and that was their food. And I like that he didn't just hand wave this, that it was just kind of woven into the story, the times we were eating gunk and how you felt about gunk and what your favorite flavor of gunk was.
Well, there was also, and that's for the people that lived there that didn't have any money, because we're not going to talk about the economy again. But for like the tourists and things that were there, they did ship real Earth food up at astronomical prices. And she was talking about her bartender. She was smuggling different types of distilled alcohols to him because he couldn't afford to have like a bottle of bourbon sent to the moon. Right. So he had like somebody on Earthside, like
bourbon extract.
Yeah, like
and some ethanol.
Boil off all of the liquid. So he had like this little pouch of powder or something. And he couldn't figure out why putting this back into ethanol didn't make it taste exactly like the bourbon that it was supposed to be. The chemical formula is exactly the same.
Yeah, that was good. And those, I think, are why I enjoy Andy Weir's writings, is he just takes time to just, like he had that bartender. There's really no need for that bartender to constantly, hey, try this one. But it was kind of funny and interesting and fleshed out the story a bit.
It was. But now, hang on. For every time that he talked about the technology being a certain way and like it is important for it to be on the moon, there was a couple of times where like what he said and then what happened didn't line up. For example, they mentioned that, we keep things at like a slightly lower air pressure, and we can't pump nitrogen into this place. So it's the atmosphere is almost 100% oxygen. And
yeah.
Now, I'm not a chemist. I'm really not.
Me either. But this immediately set off my red flags. Yeah. I know what happened in the Mercury space probe when they put 100% oxygen inside.
Bad things. Any spark, I feel like, would destroy everything everywhere instantly.
Yeah. It's really bad. You can't do that. You can't just have 100% oxygen.
Yeah, and Trond in the chapter 2 was smoking an open flame cigar, like in a room. This
was like one of the first lessons learned with manned spaceflight. Was, well, nitrogen is heavy and chemically worthless to human beings. So why would we invest time and energy into bringing nitrogen with us into space?
Because 100%.
Because if you don't, you will burn to death fast.
Yes. So. I just want to get that off my chest. The other thing was huge, ridiculous safety measures around the airlocks if you were trying to get out from inside the station out. But if you're getting from the outside of the station in, not only was it just a simple mechanical lock, so anybody could open it, which makes sense if you're outside. You don't want to be messing with the lock to try to get back inside if you're dying. But what doesn't make sense to me is there's no monitoring. Really? There's nobody in this whole station that's aware. There's not a light that comes on a console somewhere like, hey, this is a trope. This door opened.
You just have the controls where you need them or don't need them to be to make the plot go.
All right, sorry. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
One interesting science of living on the moon was how much effort he put into describing the firefighting process. And that was necessary for the story, and it's kind of what made the caper go, is the details surrounding what you would do if there were a fire in a work area or something like that.
you would, all right, realistically, I know what you're going to talk about, like a very intricate, like, we've got to save lives, and this is the process that you would follow to do that.
Right, so we got these little tubes over here, and you run everybody in the tube, you seal it off, then the room evacuates all the air, and then the rescue team comes and gets you out of the tube.
In real life, what would happen is they would seal that area off, dump all of the atmosphere into space, let everything cool down, and anybody that happened to be in there sucks to be you. Okay,
well, you just asked a really interesting question. It's the same question we're asking right now in the hypothetical situation surrounding self-driving cars. It is, are we willing to tolerate a technology where we're entertaining options where we're just accepting loss of human life? Or do we have to engineer it in such a way that no loss of human life is accepted? And I think he's probably right. We don't just engineer a system where like the only approved scenario is what lives are lost.
I agree with you, but I think his solution wasn't realistic. I think it would be a middle ground where there would be like an air shelter, like you're talking about, some kind of bug out room that you could get into and seal it off. But there wouldn't be anybody to come rescue you. It would wait until everything was well and truly like ice cold, and then they would just let you out.
Yes. This is the plot. This is necessary for the plot because it was the functions of all the system that made the caper go the way that it did.
You had to introduce Chekhov's gun so we understood what it was when they pulled it off the wall for Act 3.
Right. Okay, so there was also all the details surrounding mining, which were interesting, water recirculation. I have to ask you about one, though, Josh. explain to me the problems with physics and heat dissipation. I wasn't tracking the problems with the mining vehicles and stuff. Like, what's the problem with heat dissipation on the moon? I thought it was cold.
Yes, it is cold. It is very cold on the moon in the shade. In the light, it's very hot because the sun is beating down on you with no atmosphere to interfere. The problem is not, the problem is it's getting rid of heat because there's no medium for it to dissipate. Heat has to have something to propagate through.
So if I have a vehicle or a battery or something that's generating heat, it just gets really hot really fast and then doesn't cool down.
Well, because what we think of as radiating heat, that is heat, like the oxygen, the air, the atmosphere around the hot object is absorbing it through entropy. Everything's trying to go back to the same state of energy level. So it's the air that's getting hot, and as the air gets hot, it's pulling the heat out of the thing. If there's no air, if there's no medium for this heat to radiate or propagate to, then the heat doesn't go anywhere.
So this was part of the magic system of the book, or the technology of it, that, all right, these vehicles that are generating heat while they're mining ore have these big tanks full of solid wax that slowly turns into liquid wax, and that absorbs the heat that this machine is generating.
There's a very specific name for that. It's like state change, energy absorption or something. But the idea is that in the process of turning wax from a solid to a liquid absorbs heat. Like the wax is heating up, and that's where the heat's going. The heat's going into the wax instead of into your expensive electronics equipment. And then as the mining equipment or the machines would come back to base, they would circulate artificially chilled water or whatever through the wax to re-solidify it. But basically, the same thing that a radiator in a car does is it takes the cold coolant, pumps it through the hot thing, and then the coolant comes out hot, and the thing that was hot is now cooler.
Yeah, but it's weird that you would need to have almost like a heat battery because you can't do it in real time, so you have to store it up so that later you can discharge it. But it's like the reverse of a battery.
And those are the kinds of things that like NASA engineers have to figure out to make these things possible.
I love it. That's part of the reason I enjoy these kinds of books. One other thing, and then I'm done with the science of living on the moon, and that's gravity. That was ever present. The idea, it was in the combat, it was in the travel, it was in the systems. The only real problem I had with this is that he kind of wanted us to believe that humans that lived on the moon would look the same as humans that live on the Earth.
Oh, they would be entirely different.
Rudy was muscly, and I don't think so at all. I think they would completely atrophy down.
She mentioned that he had to have worked out with like machines or cables in order to maintain that kind of muscle mass. But at the same time, Jazz, our protagonist, would have been 7 feet tall and like bird thin, and about the same bone density too.
Right.
And this is, I know with the gravity thing specifically, it's like, okay, if we accept that humans would still be the same rough size and shape, her muscle mass and bone density would be to the point where it would be impossible for her to ever live on Earth ever. They kept threatening like, oh, we'll deport you to Earth. Oh, I'm going to have gravity sickness. No, you're going to get there and you're immediately going to die because your heart's going to be straining 6 times harder than it ever has in its whole life just to pump blood to your brain.
And your bones will break at the slightest perturbation.
You have, if you grew up for like your entire adult life on the moon, you are never coming home again.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so those were the themes, and the interactions of the characters. The plot was what it was. It was satisfying. It wasn't. I have a few gripes. The part that really, really perturbed me was all of the destruction of property. Like the amount of effort and treasure that would have to be invested to create those mining vehicles and the smelting plant and stuff like that would just be astronomically. Both literally and metaphorically, too much for that much destruction to be tolerated. Like it would have to be prevented, and she couldn't get away with it.
Well, that's the mega happy ending part, because you're right. Anybody that conducted this amount of crime, and then another part, the thing that happened, as in blowing up the smelter and releasing all these toxic chemicals into this room, they then formed chloroform that got pumped into like the whole city and everybody passed out.
It was the science handwave thing. I didn't go look it up. I assume he researched it and that's actually possible.
I'm sure it's actually possible. But like, just like if you have a bunch of random volatile chemicals and you heat them all up and explode them in a giant room, they're going to make something. I'm sure one of them could have been chloroform. But you're telling me that all of the life support systems had no way of detecting, filtering, or stopping like this cataclysm from happening? Like that's the part that blows my mind.
Okay.
But the destruction, like, Yeah, I get what you're saying, but this is the
It
wild.
was too much. I couldn't take it. I like how could she excuse in her warped morality system like that she was going to accept a million credit or a million slugs and then destroy 100 million slugs worth of equipment
Easily. Probably more than that, because it doesn't matter. That's not her. This is the evil part, because the destruction of property doesn't affect her. What affects her is her bank account balance. So she's fine with it. And
Yeah, but she didn't justify it based on that. She justified it based on, oh, well, these guys are trying to get rid of these other guys and I like them better.
no, she didn't. No, she didn't. You even said, like, she had all the moral things in her head, and then he said, I'll give you 1,000,000 slugs. And she said, where do I sign? The amount of money she was being paid overrode any moral ambiguity that she had in this situation. That's the evil part of her, if we're coming back to this conversation. But no. This is why I got mad at the mega happy ending. Like, she sat down with the administrator and they were going to, like, deport her. But then she talked her way out of it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Everybody on this station almost died because of you. Because of your actions, you are the direct result, the cause of these assassins being here in the first place. You've blown up how many hundreds of millions of dollars worth of corporate enterprise? And then they blew up the smelter, and then the Brazilian mob just went, oh, well, I guess they got us. Shucks.
I'm with you. I wrote that down. Like, of course, the mobsters are still on their way there to lay waste.
Or not to lay waste, but just to, like, get her and then pull her apart
revenge
in, like, the slowest, most torturous way possible.
Yeah, they lost a lot of money. Okay, so that was the thing, and I don't know why authors do this. This makes me feel like there was some external entity involved. Like, maybe he wrote one ending and his editor's like, no, the stakes aren't high enough. We have to hold at risk every life of every... Like, if they'd blown up the smelter and she'd made it back to the plant, I would have been completely satisfied. I don't know why it also had to include everyone getting gassed.
Yeah, that you're right. That part doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think he wanted to put the protagonist in a situation where she was in mortal danger in order to uphold the greater good. In which case, like in this scenario... She had to be willing. She had to show that she wasn't irredeemable or only bought with money and was willing to give up her life to save other people. Yes, the extra crises at the end of this book show us that Jazz, our protagonist, the person that we're supposed to be rooting for, is actually a good person.
But she did that.
But she's not.
She was in the smelting plant, and Sanchez was running around trying to prevent it from overheating, and she was like, no, I have to go back in and get her, and like, why? It's just one person. To me, that would have solved the need for that dilemma with the protagonist. Just with a single life. We didn't have to hold the entire colony at stake.
Are you sure? Because like 3 minutes ago, you said that you found this book like almost irredeemably like bad because of all of the property damage. Like people like you saw the property damage, like this is completely inexcusable. How am I supposed to root for this person? But now you're saying saving one life in the line of that destruction validates her whole
No,
world?
I didn't say that made it okay for me. I said I thought that would have been sufficient for the purpose it was supposed to serve in the story.
Gotcha. Honestly, I agree with you. There was enough other justification that blowing up the smelter, that while that's ridiculous property damage, I was okay with it. It's like, yeah, blow it up. I don't care.
Okay. Have you ever said to someone, I remember when this happened in the book, and it made me realize how much I hear this in movies and how much I've never heard it in real life. Have you ever said to someone, don't worry, I have a plan? Do you ever say that to your wife? Have you ever said that at work?
Well, I do, but the problem is I say that and I go, don't worry, I have a plan. And then I stop talking and I'm waiting for the jump cut. It never happens.
Because we don't ever get to hear what comes after that.
All right. So you want to take that to its next logical extreme where you always see this in movies where people are having a conversation and then it jump cuts to like another location, but they're like in the middle of the same sentence where it's like, so we take this for granted all the time, but these two people were having a conversation and then ceased talking and then got in an Uber and drove for 15 minutes and then got out of it and then picked up right where they left off with no break in the conversation or tone or nothing.
Yeah, I think we're aware that this is a trope. My favorite place it was dealt with was in Guardians of the Galaxy. I think Star-Lord's like, don't worry, I have a plan. I have part of a plan. And Rocket's like, how much? He's like, 10% of a plan. You have 10% of a plan.
I think that was ad-lib between them two, which is hilarious.
Yeah. No, it's good. I like it. It's playing on the trope. Like, I don't know.
I'm honestly, like, in these kinds of situations, I'm okay with it. What I'm not okay with is if one character ever looks at the other is like, you already know this, but, and then explains something just for the sake of the reader. That drives me nuts.
Yeah, well, there's not going to be a jump cut in a book like this. They explained the plan. This wasn't one of those things where, like, we had to skip ahead to the action and know that they already knew what was going to happen, but we, the reader, don't get to know.
Yeah, because that only works if you have, like, a jazz tune playing in the background. You get to jump between the different characters while the explanation's happening. Ocean's 11 style.
Yeah, this kind of was Ocean's 11. You know, we had Jazz, and we had her dad, who was the unwilling, lawful good character that got dragged into this against his will, and only because he loved his daughter. We had Rudy the Mountie. We got Svoboda, the tech guy, who's chaotic good, by the way, which I loved. There's Kelvin, her KSC pen pal, Tron, the financier, her boyfriend. Oh, I want to talk about her boyfriend for a second.
The pedophile?
Dale. Do you remember the character Dale?
Oh, I was mixing these two up because...
He was gay.
Yes, because she was dating a gay guy, and then she was friends with the guy that stole her boyfriend from her. And I was always mixing them up in the book. I couldn't tell them apart.
Yes. Yeah. So at the beginning, when we're first introduced to the character Dale, she's on her way to conduct a porter operation, and she bumps into him, and they end up in the elevator together, and immediately begins this really snippy dialogue, like right out of Seinfeld when Jerry's talking to Newman. Hello, Newman.
Yeah, like, it was clear that she absolutely loathed this person.
Yes, and I ate it up. Like, I love having a character where there are two people that are in close proximity, but they loathe each other.
But she loathed him. Like, and the way that this scene was set up, it was clever.
It went back and forth.
It was clever because, like, it seemed at the time that it was reciprocal. It seemed like he didn't like her either.
Yes.
But it wasn't like he was being a complete jerk. He was just kind of giving...
He was mirroring her energy.
Yes, exactly. It turns out he actually really liked her and wanted to be friends with her, but she wouldn't let it go.
Yeah. So I dug it. I dug this character, and he played on it later when they actually had to form an alliance, and she was very reluctant about it, but ultimately they became friends again, and I found that a very fulfilling part of the character-driven part of the story.
I agree. That was good character development for our protagonist to let it go. Like, it happened, but you're an adult. You need to get over it. You can't just hate people's guts because someone else made a decision that you disagreed with.
Now, mostly in life, when there's somebody that just makes a decision that makes us hate their guts, we then do like I said before, with the peace versus coexistence, that you avoid them. Like, you don't talk to them anymore. So in real life, you don't get snippy dialogue between Jerry and Newman because they just don't go near each other. So but there are times like being in a colony on the moon or being at the Air Force Academy where you might be in close confines with someone that you actually find to be your enemy. Have you ever found you have a Newman in your life?
There was a person at the Academy that, to this day, I maintain, if I walk over their corpse in the street, I will take a second to laugh at
it. Okay, so did you guys have dialogue like this where you were just utterly unmasked contempt to the point of hilarity?
No, because we avoided each other. Even though it was a super tiny, like, enclosed space, but we were still able to not bump into each other.
Okay, so what I'm saying is I love this trope of two people that are enemies, but not to the point of violence, that will just throw unmasked barbs at each other, but it seems to only happen in fiction and not in real life.
It was good because... like I said, the first interaction you feel like, and you thought it was reciprocal, but with the lens of hindsight after you find the whole situation and the history of it, it feels very genuine.
Yeah. I had one other thing I want to say is kind of neither here nor there, but the version I listened to was narrated by Rosario Dawson, who is the actress who plays Ahsoka Tano in the new Mandalorian series.
Is that who that is?
Yeah.
I think that's the one I listened to too. And I will say that I'm skeptical of normal actors doing voice acting because it's a very different thing, but she did a good job.
I think so too. I like hearing her voice. There was a few times where her character voices were inconsistent, but I think maybe they were just in a hurry to get her checked out, and they didn't do another take when they should have on some of these times. But it's pretty good. If you want to listen to it, I'll give the book a recommendation.
Can I do one rant? There's one thing that I've got to get off my chest.
Let's hear your rant.
At the end of this book, they were driving around. Like, one of the technologies that made it possible is they had a rover that they borrowed from the EVA master, who privately owned a moon rover. How? Why?
And it was tricked out.
It was with all the bells and whistles. It had a scissor lift built into it and its own airlock and like auto driving features. Like, why? How is it possible that you can privately own what would be like military grade equipment on the moon? Who authorized this?
I know the answer.
Who signed off on this? How did he get this thing? How much did he pay for it? Where does he keep it? Is there a garage? Who's in control of the garage? This opens so many questions.
That was a great rant. I know the answer, Josh. It's Sanderson's zeroth law of magic. Do you remember the zeroth law?
That's the rule of cool. If it's awesome, do it anyway.
Yep, that's it.
The rover drove me nuts. It's like, why is this a thing that exists? Okay, I just had to get that off my chest.
Okay, let's tie a bow on it.
Okay, so there's no real magic system in this. Are we going to talk about the magic system of?
We kind of have throughout. There's been a few times where like, yeah, that was a bit hand wavy, or I think it's pseudoscience is the magic system. Like you said, it was a Western. It was set in this kind of bubble where it was isolated from other things, and then we used that to look at humanity, economy, multiculturalism, interpersonal relationships, privacy, all these kinds of things.
All right, so no discredit to Andy Weir. Andy, if you're listening, like this is not a personal knock against you. I personally feel like this was a very good idea and a very interesting concept for a story that was executed by like a B or C list author. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like this concept in the hands of a more skilled storyteller could have been better, but it wasn't bad.
So we're back where we started, and that is this was the sophomore outing of someone who had a really good debut.
And it was fine. I don't think I'll read it again, but I'm not upset that I listened to it the first time. I enjoyed listening to it. It was fine. It had its rough patches and the hand wavy things, but that exists everywhere. In general, I'll give it a B-.
Yeah, I like the genre, and I like the conventions of this author of teaching us about science, exploring ideas about philosophy and society, and throwing in little geek debates and all of that stuff. I'm not really interested in a story with this particular protagonist. I just didn't enjoy having this chaotic, neutral-ish protagonist.
Lawful, evil protagonist.
At the center of our story.
I cannot handle a protagonist that does not uphold the law, that isn't a good guy. I can't handle it.
I don't think that's necessarily true, but I can't think of a counterexample right now, so I'm going to let you have that one. Okay. Well, audience, if you want to weigh in on the debate, would love to hear what you have to say. You can go on our subreddit at reddit.r/r/baditmagic, or you can go to our Facebook page, search us up on Facebook, and you can see I'll put photos and image macros, anything we discussed out there for you to enjoy, and you can join in on the discussion.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like what we talk about, maybe they'll like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good rating on the podcast player of your choice. You would not believe the amount of visibility we get from reviews like that.
Please, if you haven't done it, do it. Please.
And lastly, if you want me to poke Ben for being a goody two-shoes from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.